All right, let's go ahead and start the meetup. So Becca, thank you for joining us here. For those of you who don't know, most of us do invest in short-term rentals, and a lot of us already use PriceLabs. And so I've been wanting to get PriceLabs on here just to have some like advanced strategies to, especially today when bookings have been a little bit softer and we're looking to compete against everyone else. So Becca, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, super happy to be here. Do you want me to just sort of dive in?
Yes.
Okay, super cool. Hi, everybody. My name is Becca. I'm a senior solutions consultant at PriceLabs. I've been with the team for a little over a year now. Before, I was actually a property manager doing vacation rentals here in Charleston, South Carolina. So I've been in the industry for a while, even though I'm generally new to the team. Alex mentioned before, when we were kind of coordinating this, that a lot of you are already PriceLabs users. So we're kind of going to skip over a lot of the basics today. We're mostly going to talk about some of the new features that were released this year and also go over some advanced strategies for y'all to try.
Cool. Excited.
Yeah. Feel free to ask questions throughout. I don't really care. I know we're going to have plenty of time for questions at the end, but I don't mind being interrupted. So that's totally fine. But just wanted to start with a little bit about PriceLabs. We are founded in 2014 in Chicago, but we've really expanded, especially over the past couple of years. We're currently pricing over 100,000, or actually over 120,000 properties worldwide, so across over 100 different countries. Our headquarters are still in Chicago, but we're all remote. Like I said, I'm in Charleston, but I've got team members really all over the world. We're helping revenue managers, property managers, people who are just getting started in investing in their vacation rentals through a couple of our different tools. So we have three main tools: our dynamic pricing, which is kind of going to be today's focus, but we also have portfolio analytics and market dashboards. And really, our focus is kind of twofold. So the first is our dynamic pricing tool, and this is going to help you sort of price your property and even manage your minimum stay rules based on different demand trends in your market. So you should still be involved in your pricing strategy, but we're going to take a lot of the sort of time work, of the little adjustments that you might need to make day to day, try to get that automated. And then any of those changes actually being based on market data, which brings me to the second kind of thing that we're focusing on, and that's analytics. So portfolio analytics is your own data, and it's completely free to use. All you have to do is connect your listings to the dynamic pricing tool. And then we have market dashboards, which is an additional charge, but you can look at any market that you're interested in. Maybe you want to invest there, or you're currently managing properties there. It's a really great tool to use. But today, really just focusing on our new features and some advanced pricing strategies. So we'll start off talking about our new base price help tool, then move on to our minimum stay options, and then just some other strategies for you to try. Cool. Okay. So base price help. If any of you are actually familiar with the product, you probably know what base price is. But for those of you who might not be familiar, base price is generally how you tell our system where your listing should sit in the market relative to other listings around you. So we obviously don't want to price an oceanfront home with a beautiful view, high-end appliances, a pool, the same as, another 6-bedroom that's not oceanfront, needs a little work, right? So your base price kind of tells us, or tells our system, where you should sit, again, like I said, relative to others. Now, up until I think it was like January or February when we released this new tool, it was kind of a guessing game. We didn't really give you any visual data to show you, hey, this is how you should use the base price. If you have rental history, we will suggest a base price. We call it sort of our calculated or imported price. And here, I'll actually hop into our demo account so you can see. We'll use Rio's Retreat, as actually this one has seasonal changes. So we'll go to Charlotte's Web. So this is my demo account here. We're going to pretend this is a new listing, right? So we just connected Charlotte's Web. We're really excited to get it onto PriceLabs. What I did here is this is just the review prices page. Click to review. That'll actually make you or show you each listing's individual calendar. And this is where you're going to set up a lot of the listing level customizations, like your base price and minimum price. So here you'll notice that we're going to pretend this is a new listing. There's kind of a grayed out number here, and this is the base price, or the assumed price that we're reading from your current connected account, whether that's Airbnb or if you're using a property management system or channel manager. We're looking at your current daily rates. We're looking at your occupancy relative to the market, and we're making an assumption based on that. Of course, if this is a brand new listing, if this is like the first home that you bought, you've just put dummy rates in, said, hey, $1,000 a night. PriceLabs is going to do the work from here. We're going to make an assumption based on those dummy rates. So this is where the help me choose a base price tool really comes into play. So I can do a couple different things here. I can use this map and actually look at all the listings around me. I can click on them and it'll actually pull up the Airbnb booking page.
That's new, right, Becca? Is that because I thought that
yeah,
you had
this
to
is
do that
this
in your
whole
market
this tool
dashboard,
is
right?
all brand new, so I'm super
Right.
excited about it.
Right. Yeah, and I saw it drawing like a map around. I don't remember that at all. So
Exactly. So
Yeah.
say my listing is in downtown Charlotte here, right? That's great. This is the general comp set that we would pull in, but maybe when I'm choosing my base price, I want to say, hey, I really only want a base price that's similar to other downtown listings. So I can lasso select here and
Oh, wow.
just draw right around this downtown area.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And this page is a demo account. So normally there would be like a save area button here. But this account doesn't have that right now for some reason. And that would actually update this market-based recommended price. So you can also, there's a couple other levers here. So if maybe you have like a more budget accommodation, you can say, hey, I want to be more competitive with the lower price listings in the market. Or I know that my property is high-end luxury. Let's just, price it at closer to the top of the market.
Is that low, medium, high? Or is that like based on like the 50th percentile, 75th percentile? Is that how it's basing it off?
Yeah, no, you've
Okay.
got it. You've got it. So we're looking, and it's important to remember that we aren't going to ever really price match you to the market, because at points it's going to be more advantageous for you to be priced higher than your competitors, on those really high demand dates when you don't want to be the first person booked, and we're really trying to get you as much revenue possible. And then other times you want to be priced lower than the competition. If there's low demand, you kind of want to undercut the market a little bit and optimize yourself for occupancy. So this is just generally saying, on average, where will your pricing be? Will it be at the top of the market, close to that 75th percentile, or maybe closer to the 25th percentile? But of course, it's still going to fluctuate up and down with demand. Beautiful. Any questions there? If not, we can have them at the end. That is totally fine. The next thing I want to go into, and this one's going to take a little bit of time, is our minimum stay profile. So I think since 2017, we've been controlling minimum stay. We give you all sorts of options, things like, so typically you'd start with a default option where maybe you can say, hey, I've got a 2-night minimum all year long. And then you can make adjustments to that rule, whether it's close in. So last minute, you can be a little bit more flexible. We'll automatically drop from a 2-night minimum down to a 1-night minimum to try to fill in that calendar. Maybe far out, you don't want a bunch of 1- and 2-night stays blocking dates 6 months in advance. You'd rather really try to get longer stays. So we can actually say, hey, if you're booking 6 months in advance, we're going to require a 4- or 5-night minimum. And then, of course, if there's any gaps on your calendar where maybe you have a 4-night minimum and you've got that 2-night gap, we're automatically going to change that for you. So we've been doing that for years now, but we just recently made some huge improvements. The first thing is that we have minimum stay profiles now. This is going to really streamline your setup. And again, like it says here, avoid human error. So I'll show you where that is in the dashboard. So I'll exit out of here. Now, up at the top is this dynamic pricing menu. You'd go down to this customizations page. Now, this is kind of like the higher level control. So, of course, with PriceLabs, any listing level changes that you can make. You can also make at the account level or set up groups and make those changes. So you're applying customizations or strategies sort of in bulk instead of having to go listing by listing. Our minimum stay profiles are sort of a similar thought process. So instead of having to say, hey, I'm going to set up kind of these complicated strategies at every single listing, you can just set up one profile and then apply it to every listing, or apply this profile to your entire account. What's also super neat is we have the option of applying these seasonally. So if you're in a seasonal area like here in Charleston, I'm going to have a completely different strategy for my minimum stay in my summer season, this high, July, August season, than in maybe my December or January, right? So here, if you just click create profile, it'll give you all these options. So again, you'd want to start with that default rule. Normally I would have a 2-night minimum. Last minute, maybe I'm okay with a 1-night stay, whether somebody's checking in on a weekend or weekday. Maybe on weekends, I always want to have 2 nights because people might be partying, then I'll say within 7 days. Just below that, we have our minimum stay for far out bookings. So like I was saying, optimizing your calendar. You don't want to allow 1 and 2 night stays booked really far in advance because it's going to be really hard to fill those in. So here I'll say maybe in this market, I want to have a 5-night minimum if somebody's booking outside of 90 nights. So anybody booking 3 months in advance has to stay 5 nights. We also have some really great, so one of the changes that we made this year were these buttons here, where you can add another minimum stay rule, right? So you can do levels now. So I can say, okay, I'm actually okay with 1-night stays if they're today or tomorrow within 1 night, but I will do this 1 and 2 night strategy within 7 nights still. So you can get really granular with your customizations, right? And of course, like I was saying, you can apply those seasonally.
Becca, I think my issue is whenever I have like a gap, right? Like there's a 3-night gap, and I'm probably doing it wrong, but like I usually have like a 4-night minimum or 5-night minimum, but there's like a 3-night minimum,
Okay.
or there's a 3-day gap. And it's when I go in there, it says, the guest isn't able to book because there's a 5-night minimum.
Okay.
So I think they're not able to search for my listing at that point.
Okay.
So
you definitely need to make sure that your Orphan Gap rules are set up. So we'll set this back in. So maybe we'll say you normally have a 2-night minimum, but outside of 30 days, you have a 5-night minimum, right? For example, maybe last minute, you're okay with a 1-night stay. And 3 nights. Now, the Orphan Gap rule is very important because it's going to automatically look for gaps on your calendar and then say, hey, you've got a 3-night gap when you normally have a 5-night minimum. Let's reduce that minimum down to that 3 nights or down to whatever, minimum you actually want it to. The easiest way I can sort of explain setting this rule up would be to leave weekday and weekend as length of gap. Length of gap is essentially saying, hey, regardless of the length, the minimum is going to change to whatever that gap length is. So if it's a 2-night gap, it'll change to a 2-night minimum. If it's a 3-night gap, it'll change to a 3-night minimum. And that's only if the gap isn't able to be filled. So if you have, say, a 2-night minimum and a 3-night gap, it's not going to raise your minimum at any point. It's only going to lower.
Okay.
Now, these 2 boxes here essentially are asking, okay, what should PriceLabs define as a gap, right? What I typically recommend is for this first box, put your lowest minimum. So in this case, my lowest minimum is 1. I'm okay with 1-night stays, so I'll put 1 here. If I don't allow 1-night stays, then I would put 2 or 3 or whatever my lowest minimum is. And then the second box, I would put 1 less than my longest minimum. So maybe my longest minimum is 5 nights, or maybe for some holiday, I, raise it to 7 nights. For this example, we'll say 5. 1 less than 5 is 4. Now, why 4? 5 nights will always be bookable as long as there are 5 consecutive nights available on my calendar. We're going to run into a problem if there's 4 nights available when I would normally have a 5-night minimum. So first box, your lowest minimum, second box, one less than your highest minimum. Does that make sense? It's
Yeah,
kind
I
of
think
confusing.
I think where I was messing up is where it says length of gap. I was doing the drop down menu and putting something there, and maybe that's where I messed up on. So I don't
Yeah.
know.
So
Or
with
I put
yeah. Length of gap, I always think that's kind of like the foolproof option.
okay.
Choosing one of these other options can make you a little bit more flexible. So like if I choose length of gap -1 or length of gap -2, it's going to look at maybe a 4-night gap. And for weekdays, it'll say, hey, I'm okay with a 3-night minimum, the length of the gap -1.
Oh, okay. I got it.
Weekends, length of gap -2. If you do a static minimum, this will work out in some cases where, hey, like if I have a 4-night gap, not everybody wants to stay the exact 4 nights that I have available. It's going to be a lot easier to fill a 2-night period within that gap. But if I change all my 1-night gaps to a 2-night minimum, then it's not really going to work out, which is why we actually added this ability to have like multiple levels. So I could say, hey, for all of my 1-night gaps, I'm okay with a 1-night minimum. But for the rest of my gaps, whether it's between 2 and 4 nights, I'm going to be flexible and allow just a 2-night minimum.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
So many levels to it.
I know.
Because sometimes I think I've complicated things so much.
Yeah.
And I just want to just start over. I'm like, okay, I don't, because there's different rule sets, right? Like as far as what overrides what, right?
Yeah. So for the minimum stay, it's pretty simple. It's really just, we try to make it, or at least we try to make it simple, where we want you to get bookings. So typically, like whatever, if you have this orphan gap set up, again, it's not going to raise your minimum ever. It should drop it down to be bookable, unless you have something set up where it's like the static 2-night and you have a 1-night gap, in which case it can get tricky. But this is a great sort of segue because introducing the minimum stay recommendation engine. So this is actually really going to simplify your life. This is something that you can set at the listing level. And we're actually recommending a minimum stay policy based on the data. So it's not just you being like, okay, maybe 4 nights outside of 30 days and 5 nights outside of 90 days, just kind of pulling numbers out of the air. We're actually using all this data that we've been scraping from Airbnb and Vrbo, actually looking at, how long people are staying for and when they're making those bookings, specifically for listings that are your size. So I'll show you how this works.
So instead of optimizing price, you're optimizing stay also. Like it's kind of like that, right?
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Oh man, that's gonna make it so much easier.
I know, because explain it. I run the webinars, like the one-on-one webinars, and I'm the minimum stay update. Always, there's so many questions, and I'm like, yes, we have a suggestion now. So all you do, I'm just at this listing level. I was on this review prices page, clicked review prices. Down here is your customization panel. I'm just going to click edit and then go down to stay restrictions. I'm going to click the setting suggestions available. And then I'm going to select prefer short-term. We consider midterm to be 14 days or more, and click go. We're then going to gather all that data from your area and suggest a minimum stay profile based on what we've seen. In this area in Charleston, it happens to give us a little like warning saying, hey, in January, February, November, and December, which is our like really low season, maybe we should, lower the minimum stay a little bit. But otherwise, this is what we would suggest. So in Charleston, for 3 bedrooms, it would be a 2-night stay on weekdays and 3-night stay on weekends. So that's sort of like the general default rule. We're going to make exceptions last minute, allowing 1-night stays for anything booked within 6 nights. And then far out, we're going to raise that minimum from 2 and 3 up to 5 outside of 30 nights. We're going to raise it again to 7 outside of 90 nights. And then we've already just calculated what your orphan gap needs to look like in order to ensure that any gaps are filled or fillable. That makes sense. You can click apply and customize and say I don't actually like 1-night stays, totally fine. I can either uncheck them here, Or after I click apply and customize, I can just change any ones to twos.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
That's kind of my workaround there. And then click save and it will apply to your listing. Pretty neat, huh?
Yeah, that would have saved me like hours.
Sorry.
I think we're all there.
You should
But
still try. You should see how our
improves over time.
recommendations stack up to what you're currently doing. No
Right,
harm in giving it, taking a look at it.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna go back and take a look.
Yeah,
So.
cool. Cool. So just wanted to kind of go over, if we still have time, I know I'm kind of like running a little bit later than I wanted to, but just wanted to touch on some advanced customizations. Like you said, markets are kind of changing right now. So wanted to dive into some newer and maybe some overlooked features that are actually pretty powerful. So the first one I already mentioned, and that's our custom seasonal profile. So this is neat because, and I'm mentioning it because we can actually set those minimum stays seasonally. So again, I'll click edit on the customizations. The third option down is seasonal and minimum prices. If I turn this on, you can use this to make adjustments to things like your minimum price and your maximum price seasonally. So like again, here in Charleston, if I was managing a property for an owner and I got a booking for $100 a night in January, they would be thrilled. If I sold a property for $100 a night in July, I would probably be fired. So you can use this to sort of control the bands that we're operating within. I will warn you, even though I have base prices set here, I typically do not recommend changing your base price seasonally. Going back to the base price help, remember it's an average daily rate for the entire year. So if you say, hey, PriceLabs, I'm really smart. I know that my summer season is my high season and I'm going to raise my rates accordingly. We're also going to be raising your rates. So if you like double your base price during your high season, your rates are going to look really inflated. So this is an advanced tool where I'd say, hey, you can make a incremental change. If you want to be just a little bit higher in July, you can make a July season and raise your base price like 5 or 10%, but definitely don't double it or your rates are going to look crazy. Minimum stay profiles you can assign here. So maybe in my high season, I can choose my high season profile. And then in my low season, I can be a little bit more flexible and choose my off season profile.
That's a new feature too, right? Like adding that on the customization.
Yeah, the minimum stay profiles are giving us like a lot of new options. So this option right here is brand new. We've had minimums, or we've had the custom seasonal profiles. Again, we don't usually tell people about, like we do, like I run our advanced webinar every Thursday and we go over them, but I always like to warn people not to play with the base price because that's one of the biggest mistakes that I'll see.
What about like me? I do the percentage.
Yeah, that's great too.
Because
Again,
I have like multiple properties in the same area, and then I just apply this same percentage to all of them versus trying to figure out like different rates for all of them.
Exactly. So like say I have my base or my minimum price of 300 and I just want to double it for my, my high season, I can just put a percent change of 100% here. I can do a 5% increase for my base price.
And that's on top of what PriceLabs is already, right?
Exactly. So we wouldn't normally make changes to your minimum prices seasonally. So that's something that you fully control. But any changes that you make to the base price will be on top of what we're already doing, which is why it's important that you really just make small incremental changes here and there.
Oh, maybe I'm doing it wrong. But summertime, I have like 60%. That's why.
You would be surprised. So when I actually like was interviewing for PriceLabs, they took a look at my PriceLabs account and they're like, oh, you're using seasonal base prices. And I had no idea that I was doing it wrong. So I'm here to tell everybody, just do incremental changes and it'll look a lot better.
Oh, okay.
I don't know, you might be hitting your max price, or hey, maybe your listings are just super great and can take a 60% increase for your high season.
Well, that's why I wanted to have you on, because last year I had a 60% booking or 60% above the base price, and I was 100% booked, right? And then I did try to do the same thing this year, but it was my fault that I didn't recognize the market was changing that fast. And then now my occupancy completely tanked. I mean, in June, I was like 67% or something like that. And so I probably left a lot on the table. So
Yeah,
it's
I'm
probably too
hearing
aggressive
that
there.
as next slide we're going to talk about occupancy based adjustments, and I think
Mm,
this will help you going
yeah.
forward. I'm sorry that that happened.
You learn,
Um,
live and learn,
yeah,
make
it's part of
mistakes,
the
right?
game. The market's never going to be the same year over year. So
Right.
great. So the next one I wanted to show y'all is also brand new, the demand factor aggressiveness feature. So this is hidden under our advanced customizations. So this one right here. Now our demand factor is what is making adjustments for high demand or low demand dates, whether that's like a holiday like Thanksgiving or New Year's, or maybe there's a football game in town, things that we're picking up that are saying, hey, we need to price way higher because demand is through the roof. So you'll notice I'm on my neighborhood data page, which this is going to look at your rates and occupancy compared to the market. Focusing on this first graph here, I'm taking a look at some of these sort of peaks. So this black line on this graph is showing our recommended prices. The colors in the background are representing the market. So either the market's 25th to 50th percentile, that's sort of this, I can zoom in here. We'll zoom into like Thanksgiving. So the gray area here is sort of the market's 25th to 50th. The dark pink is the 50th to 75th. And then the light pink is the 75th to 90th percentile. So the sort of lower end to highest pricing that we're seeing in the market, with your recommended pricing overlaid over that. So if I'm looking at Friday, November 25th, the day after Thanksgiving, our recommended price is currently $8.49. And that's with our recommended demand factor. You might come in here and you're like, this whole dynamic pricing thing, it's a little scary. I don't think I could ever get close to $900 a night for this listing. You can come to this demand factor aggressiveness tab and change this to conservative. This is going to tone down our demand factor and really tone down the recommendations for those high demand dates. So hopefully my internet will cooperate with me. It's been a little slow today. It's been raining. I'm not sure if that's actually a thing, but I always blame it on the rain. Okay. Sometimes when I'm sharing my screen on Zoom, that's when it, let's see, make sure that, okay. Let's see, sometimes just a little refresh helps. Okay, super cool. That's exactly what I wanted to see. So now hovering over that same date, that November 25th, we were recommending $8.49, but with that conservative factor, which really dampened it, we're looking at a recommendation of $7.18. So that can be a little bit helpful if you're new to dynamic pricing, not sure about how your listing is going to perform. Changing it to conservative can sometimes make our rates look a little bit more palatable. Of course, on the other end of the spectrum, sometimes people come to me and say, Becca, my prices need to be way higher for these high demand events. Of course, you can always switch it to aggressive, which is going to have the opposite effect. And hopefully it'll load a little faster.
$2,000.
Yeah, we'll see. Maybe I'll just do the refresh thing again. Oh, there we go. So yeah, it's not $2,000, but it's definitely higher. It's we're now recommending a price of $981, where our sort of recommended factor had us at $849. So something else to try out if you're a little bit concerned about how those peaks are looking. Do I have time for like 3 more things now?
Yeah.
Okay.
People love you. I'm telling you, like we could eat this stuff up. So
You flatter me. Cool. So another new thing that we just came out with that I absolutely love. So we were talking about Orphan Days for our minimum stay, right? We actually separate Orphan Days for minimum stay and actually Orphan Day pricing, because Orphan Days for minimum stay might mean something different than what you actually want to do with your price. So under general, we have our Orphan Day prices, and by default, so like if this looks like it's turned off, that means the default is applying, and the default is to apply a 20% discount for gaps of 1 or 2 nights. So if you have like a 3-night gap in your calendar, we're not actually discounting at all. It's only for 1 and 2-night gaps. Now, people have been hesitant to play with this feature because up until recently, it applied regardless of it being a weekend or a weekday. But now we can uncheck this apply on weekend box, switch this 2%. What I've been actually recommending a lot of our clients do is do like a 20 or some sort of discount for gaps of like 4 or 5 nights. What this is going to do, and this isn't a great account to like show you this, but a lot of the times I'll see that people are booked on all of their weekends and they've got like a bunch of 4 and 5 night midweek gaps that are going to be way harder to fill. So by adjusting this, making it not apply on weekends and having us recognize like a longer gap, it's going to be a lot easier for you to fill those 4, 5, even 3-night midweek gaps that are popping up on your calendar without affecting any of those high demand weekends.
Okay, so just checking that, it gives a 20% off discount.
So by default, we're looking at your calendar for gaps of 1 or 2 nights and applying a 20% discount. Okay. By turning this on and saying 20% for gaps of 4 nights or less and making sure this isn't checked, any midweek gaps are going to be discounted.
Okay, got it.
Awesome. And then the last 2, and I'll go through these rather quickly. These aren't really new, but they're more advanced. And I just wanted to mention them because we are seeing a lot of changes in the market. And these sort of act as like guardrails that kind of help your listing. You know, even if the market is doing one thing, it's really important what your own listing is doing, right? Or your listings in the case of portfolio occupancy. So again, we're already actually doing this. So if you look at your calendar, if you look at any specific day, hovering over it, you're going to see under price customizations, the listing occupancy factor. Now we're looking at each of your individual listings and applying either premiums or discounts, or sometimes we're not even changing the price at all, based on your occupancy over specified day ranges. So if this is off, that means that our default is applying, but I'm going to turn it on and click edit just to show you what's going on. So this is already applying unless you've made a change to it. So say 31 to 60 days from now, so early to mid-August to mid-September, your listing is already 80% booked. That means that we're going to apply a 10% premium to our prices for those dates. If that same listing over the next 2 weeks has less than 10% occupancy, then we're going to drop prices drastically by 15%. So again, this sort of acts like guardrails to ensure that if you're, not meeting your occupancy goals, then we're going to discount, or if you're exceeding them, we're going to raise your prices. This matrix is completely customizable. So if you want us to look beyond 60 days, maybe you have a really large home that has a booking window that's like 90 days or something, you can add additional columns and you can say, hey, if I'm in the 61 to 90 day window and I'm not even at 40% occupancy, I want to start discounting. And you might already be doing this manually. You're probably looking at your calendar month by month and saying, whoa, September's looking really bleak right now. Let me drop my prices. This is going to automatically do that for you. Now, you don't need to do a custom profile. I typically don't recommend doing a custom profile. We do have a couple of profiles that I'd like to kind of share. So this is the default. I really like the aggressive profile. So I'll switch between them again. So this is the default. You'll notice really the highest discount that we give you is 15%. Aggressive, if you have less than 10% occupancy over the next 2 weeks, we're going to drop your prices by 30%. Of course, never below your minimum, but we're going to drop it, trying to get you any sort of booking last minute. Once today passes, you can't sell today anymore. We're working with an expiring inventory. So this is just a little bit more aggressive for you. So if you have a brand new listing, or if you say, hey, the summer is not shaping up the way I expected it to, you can just pop this on, and I recommend this over making an adjustment to say your base price, because your base price is going to affect your entire year. So if I drop this, it means that my next year is going to be priced lower, my winter will be priced lower. This is just affecting the next 60 days, and it's reactive to your occupancy. So if you start to book up, we're not going to be discounting as aggressively anymore. Make sense? We do offer far out premium and last minute step discount. I would stay far away from those. But coronavirus is also a really good one. So this is kind of one that we developed in 2020.
Really aggressive, right?
Yeah, it's super
Hyper
aggressive.
aggressive.
And you notice we never raise your prices. So you could be 100% booked and we're like, we're just happy that we have bookings. We're not raising prices here. Of course, if last minute you don't have anything, we're just going to try to get somebody in there to fill those gaps. Now, the final one I just wanted to show you, and this one is like, I almost didn't put it in the presentation. It's our portfolio occupancy-based adjustments. Now, this is only available at the group level. So I'm going to go over to that customizations page. Now, this is interesting because it's actually looking at group occupancy. So if I open up this calendar, it looks like I don't actually have any listings in this group. So normally, if I had listings in this group and this wasn't a fake account, it would show you the occupancy for each day. So say I've got 3 units in this group, one of them is booked. The 22nd would say 33%. The 24th would maybe say 66% because there are 2 booked that day, right? So what portfolio occupancy-based adjustments do, and this is on the groups page, you'd go to advanced customizations, and it's the last one here. This is actually looking at your group occupancy day by day and saying, hey, am I booking up faster for next July or, a certain weekend than the rest of the market? Because our algorithm is going to account for what's going on in the market, but this puts a little bit more weight on your portfolio. So maybe you have a bunch of 2 bedrooms in the same city, and all of a sudden, 5 of your 10 2-bedrooms have a booking for a weekend that hasn't really started to book up in the rest of the market. This works as a guardrail for your entire, portfolio, essentially. So something to pay attention to, something to think about. Again, this is more useful for those who have sort of growing portfolios. If you only have 1 or 2 listings, it won't really work as well for you. But once you start to grow and have different types of listings in different locations, you start to group things together. Really interesting tool to use. Yeah, that's about all I have today. I'd be more than happy to sort of go back on anything if there's any questions or yeah, I don't know how you want to run this.
Thanks. I think all of us have to rewatch this stuff over again just to get our pricing down right. But if you guys have any questions, just go ahead and jump on in. I do have a couple of questions just because I get asked it all the time. Minimum price and base price and max price. Like some people are like, why do you even put a max price? And I only put one because I watched one of your presentations and someone said, yeah, you should always have a max price. So that's always my default answer. Well, because PriceLabs told me to. Yeah. and so, but as far as minimum price, like a lot of times my base price, like I'm wanting to go, will it go below the minimum price with any of these like defaults, like minus 30% and then like, discounts for, orphans or whatever, will it not ever go below the minimum price?
That's a great question. So the minimum price is sort of like I don't want to say like the holy grail, but it's your bottom line and we want to respect that. So none of the customizations that you set, there's like 2 exceptions, but none of the customizations that you set should ever drop below your minimum. The only time that we will drop below your minimum is you can set under last minute prices a fixed rate. So if my minimum price is $300 and I set a last minute fixed minimum that is lower than the normal minimum that I set, we're going to follow that new rule that you've set up.
I see.
The only other time is if you specifically select dates on your calendar or make a season and say, hey, I'm making a change to my minimum price. Otherwise, we're going to respect that all day long. But
even with the seasonal, like, because I think I put like minus 10% in this season.
So if you say, here, let me open up that seasonal profile. If you change your minimum, then so like say you did this, you have this on percentage and you do -10.
Yes.
That's going to calculate off of this minimum. So for this season, it'll be 10% lower than your normal minimum. So you're physically making a change to your minimum right here.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. And it's important to remember, I think that this kind of gets overlooked a lot, but both the minimum and the maximum exist outside of the algorithm. So what that means in like simple terms is that we're never going to drop your prices specifically to meet your minimum because you set a minimum of 300. The only time you're going to see your minimum or your maximum on your calendar is if we would be recommending a price lower than your minimum or higher than your maximum, and we're just hitting those ceilings and floors that you've input.
Yeah, I've had one good friend of mine. She says all she does is set the minimum, and she doesn't have a base or a max. And I couldn't answer if she was doing the right thing or not. I'm like, I don't know.
Definitely set a base price because it's not like we're not really making any changes. There's no advantage to not setting a base price. That's just you kind of saying, okay, this was the average daily rate that I had when I first connected my account. And we're kind of just running with that still. Now, when it comes to a maximum price, a lot of our users don't set a maximum. A lot of them are really surprised by what they're able to get. It seems like you kind of know what you're able to get, and putting a cap on that isn't necessarily a bad idea. A lot of times I'll recommend it if it's sort of a like a budget accommodation, a value stay. You don't want to get a poor review based on value. But a lot of times I don't recommend a maximum because I think that people have these like what's the word? Preconceptions, is that a word? where they're like, okay, I know I can't ever get more than $400 a night, and when in fact they're able to get $800 a night during certain events and things.
Someone told me that if you didn't set a maximum, like you would only get a percentage above your base, but like right now it's at 450, but let's say the Super Bowl's in town, would it get $2,000 if the calculations came out to that?
So I guess that does make sense. So we do have a safety minimum and maximum in place. The safety max is 10 times your base price. So in this case, our safety maximum would be like $4,500.
Oh, so it's not even close though.
No, not even close. Unless you like, there are some places. So like
Coachella.
Like Coachella is like a crazy market where like you see like absurd rates on like normally you'd charge 200, but you can get like 10,000 a night or something. So that's kind of like an outlier, but in most cases our like safety max is plenty high.
The other thing I'm confused with, because I think what I did is I set it up to because I use Guesty for hosts as the account. And sometimes like VRBO is a little slow, and I think the parent and child relationship confused me a lot initially because I was setting up Hofi, right? And I added Hofi on there, and there was no way to do that unless you did the parent and child relationship. I mean, do you recommend having the Airbnb VRBO and like whatever other accounts you have? Or am I doing it completely wrong? I don't know if that makes sense.
No, you're totally fine. So you are on Guesty for hosts, right?
Yes. Yeah.
You are waiting to be connected to Verbo on Guesty for hosts.
I think sometimes Verbo is a little slow, and I don't know if that's just Verbo being Verbo, or if it's PriceLabs, like syncing to Airbnb and then sending the price to Verbo.
So do you have like Guesty for hosts, Verbo, Hoofy or Hoofy?
Yeah, I haven't figured it out either. So, or how to say it. But I think I just have Guesty for host. And it's always just been one thing. And then like this week I was like, oh, let me start adding Hofi or Halfy, whatever you say.
Yeah. So when it comes to our connection to Guesty for hosts, we can only control like our prices going to Guesty for hosts. They
Okay.
control it being sent to Airbnb and Vrbo and any
Mm,
other channels that you're listing on. So if
I
you're
see.
noticing that one connection's like a little bit slow, I'd bring it up to them. They might know. I do know that our connection to Vrbo can be a little bit slower than some of them. So it might just be like their API.
Mhm.
I'm not 100% sure.
Right.
But yeah, the mapping thing can be a little bit confusing. So mapping essentially, for those of you who aren't using Guesty for host or like a PMS or channel manager, mapping it essentially tells our system, hey, I'm going to have duplicate listings. Don't charge me as me having 10 listings because I only actually have 5. They're just listed on 2 separate channels. It is a little bit confusing. I think that it's kind of, I feel like mapping is like a data science, like computer science like term. And they kind of developed this not thinking about the everyday user.
Right.
But it is something that we're working on. I actually think that I think this quarter we're going to revamp how the mapping works to make it a little bit
Mm.
more intuitive.
Yeah, because I get confused. I'm like, oh shoot, did I change the price wrong on the wrong one or something like that?
Yeah, it should always be the parent listing or the listing that doesn't have like italicized font,
Mm. Okay.
if that helps at all.
Yeah.
Motion
Right.
detected at the garage.
I think those are all the questions I had. Did anyone else have any questions to jump in here? Any?
I have one question, Alex.
Yeah, I can jump on in here.
How you doing, Jesse from Long Beach, sir? My question is, when you set the pricing, like on those promotions they offer on Airbnb, you get set like, it says if you set 20%, then it'll give the guest emails and things like that. How does that work with PriceLabs?
Yes. Great question. So, super important for when you're setting your minimum price. So, how our system works, the prices that you see on this PriceLabs calendar are essentially going to be sent to whatever account you have connected, whether it's Airbnb, Guesty for hosts, any of those. And it's going to look like you went in and input a different daily rate for each day. The Guesty for hosts, Airbnb, they're not going to see, okay, this Wednesday is discounted because it's an orphan day and all of that. It's just going to see, okay, today is 6/11, tomorrow is 7/12, the next day is 8/05. So keep that in mind when you're setting your minimum, because if you have any additional discounts either set up for like your direct booking site or a promotion like on Airbnb, that's going to come off of the total. So it would basically add up these dates and then take like 20% off of that total, right? I'm a huge fan of using the Airbnb promotions. It takes a little bit more work, but like you said, sometimes they offer email marketing for you. Sometimes they offer putting you higher in the search results. When you're using those promotions and discounts, don't think of it as discounting as like a price reduction. Think of it as you more or less buying marketing from, Airbnb almost. So I'm a huge fan of kind of using both our discounts so that you are priced optimally, but also their promotions so that you are taking advantage of the perks that they give you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, of course. Happy to help.
All right. Anyone else with questions out here? I don't know.
Yes, I do. What is the quickest way to get the suite-based price that ultimately that give the maximum revenue?
That's so hard because everybody's goals for their short-term rental business. Yes, everybody's goals is to get the maximum revenue, of course, but how you get there, there's a couple different ways to do it. There's more than a couple. So for me to say, okay, this is going to be the maximized base price specifically for your listing, specifically for your goals for your market, is actually a lot trickier than it sounds. I would say, take a look at this base price help tool. Use this map to look at similar listings around you. Like I said, you can say, okay, this one has a base price of 363. I'm saying base price, it's actually their average rate over the next year. But if you've been paying attention, base price is kind of like your average rate. So it generally will translate. You can look at a couple of other listings around you that, have a similar look or similar feel, maybe similar, professional photos, things like that, and gain a little bit of insight there. Once you've been syncing for 10 days, we should start recommending a new base price for you. If your listing is doing really well with the base price that you have set, so like say I set 450 because that was sort of the market-based price, we might say, hey, 10 days from now, let's raise that by 5%. You've been booking up way faster than the rest of the market. Let's tweak it a little bit. So unfortunately, there's no sort of like one and done answer. I would say come in, review how your, listing is performing, check out that new recommendation. If it makes sense, accept it, maybe raise it or lower it a little bit. And hopefully over time, that'll really get into like a fine-tuned, because things are always going to change. Like our prices don't necessarily account for, say, like inflation. Like we're not just saying, hey, inflation raised by 6% this quarter, let's raise all of our prices by 6%. That's going to be translated through the base price. So you should be going in and updating your base price like at least once a year to sort of account for things like that.
We have a question here from Danny.
Yeah.
Danny wrote, how updated is their base price recommendation tool? It keeps recommending a crazy high base price, which doesn't translate to the slump we see in ADR.
Okay. Yeah. Danny, I would love for you to actually reach out to us. We're always looking at improving the algorithm. If you're seeing something that's like a little off, let us know so we can actually take a look and say, hey, maybe this is something that needs to be improved. If I had to guess, your listing has probably had really good performance relative to the market up until this point. So we're not necessarily saying, okay, quick, let's drop prices, because again, that base price is going to affect all of your rates for the next year and forward. So we try to be kind of conservative with our recommendations. But if you're noticing like things just don't seem right, just email us, just let us know, because we really are always trying to improve.
One last question, Becca. Is this taking into account just that, because I think at one point, was it just taking into account Airbnb prices? But is it now doing Vrbo prices as well and using that data?
Yeah. So we scrape 3 sources. We scrape Airbnb, Vrbo, and Booking.com. Booking.com currently is just shown through hotel data in this neighborhood data section. But we are expanding that this year and hope to sort of include that in our algorithm going forward. By default, in this neighborhood data section, you're just going to see Airbnb data. We're using both, but you see Airbnb just because that gets back to the sort of mapping of listings. There's duplicates on both websites, so it gets kind of muddy if you combine all that data. So right now it's either or. If you happen to be in an area, like I know parts of Florida are like super just reliant on Vrbo and not really into using Airbnb, let us know and we can actually give you the option to switch this data section to show you the Vrbo data.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, and sometimes like the beach markets, it's just all Vrbo or something like that. So
yeah,
that'd be helpful. Yeah.
I hear it most in like Gulf of Florida and sometimes like down in the Keys and stuff, but I'm sure there's pockets in California and really all over the place that are kind of like that.
Right. Any more questions for Becca? You got the master here who has all the answers. You can ask.
I don't know about that. Got some of them.
But what I am going to do
question, Alex?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Jesse.
One more question, and it's back to the Airbnb promotional rate thing. Is there a strategy with your, obviously my bookings are down, but is there a strategy to set that bottom minimum price and then still, so do you have to kind of do the math ahead of time when you're going to discount it 20%, or even more, set the price high and then discount it 30%? Does any of that stuff make magic?
Yeah, I've seen people kind of get really in depth with it where they'll actually come in here and make like a date specific override where they say, okay, I know I'm going to put a promotion on these dates on Airbnb. So I'm actually going to raise my prices by 10%. And then I'll put a 20% promotion on Airbnb. So it's only dropping it a little bit. And you still get the
Tricky, yeah.
benefit of the email marketing, of the SEO, all that good stuff. So you can go like that far. Typically, I just say if you know that like your minimum price for a stay is like $200 a night, it's not worth your time to go clean and, handle a turnover at less than that. At least set your minimum a little bit higher. So just in case it is super last minute, we're recommending your minimum price and you have a promotion. We don't dip below what you're comfortable booking for. But you can get really, really in depth with it too, if you have the time and want to.
Thank you.
Hey, Becca, we just want to thank you one more time. We're coming up on the hour here. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I know you're in the East Coast. This is crazy. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. You and Lenny, the boss over there, are in the East Coast, so it's really late. So we're going to go ahead and stop the meeting. So if you guys want to rewatch it, it's on my Facebook account right now. It's also on the Healthcare Professionals Investing in Real Estate. My dumbass forgot to hit record, but what I'll do is I'll download it. It's something I always do. I'm telling you, but I'm gonna download it from Facebook and then put it to YouTube so that way people can watch it. So with that said, Becca, thank you. And how can people get a hold of you, or do they just contact the help or
just reach
or
out.
whatever?
Yeah, just reach out to support@pricelabs.co if you want to talk to me specifically. Be like, hey, you want to chat with Becca?
Okay.
That is totally fine. But yeah, our support team can answer things a lot more quickly than I personally can, and they're full of really knowledgeable, great people. Everybody is like live. It's not any robots or anything. So yeah, we'd be more than happy to help.
Okay. All right, guys. Thank you, guys. Next week we're talking with Kenny Bidwell. STR Insights. Everyone's always asking like, which markets do I invest in? He's going to tell us. So I'll see you guys then.
Thanks so much.